Hey there, this is Debra Ann Clement, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of Shortcut to the Soul. So the topic is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Now, I know that occurred several weeks ago on April 20th, and at that time there was a big focus on how would it affect people on an individual level? But the truth is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, it occurs approximately every 14 years. So it tends to play out really more on the national or global sense. And we are going to continue to see that influence really play out for many years to come. But just in the past few weeks, there have been 3 events that can certainly be attributed to this conjunction. And while one of them is certainly out there in our face, there were a couple that I think, maybe people might have missed. So the one that's front and center, the campus protests. The first anti-Israel, pro-Palestine campus protest actually occurred at Columbia University on April 17th. That was a couple of days before the conjunction was exact. But again, the influence is building. Its influence was already well in effect. In astrology, very often, by the time an aspect is exact, there usually has been an event that has occurred. Now, since the exact aspect, protests have erupted. I believe it's about more than 150 university campuses now across the United States. And many have escalated right into a riot situation, resulting in about 2,000 arrests. So, in astrology, Jupiter rules colleges and universities. Uranus rules rebellion and chaos. You blend those two energies together, right? Makes perfect sense. But in addition to ruling colleges and universities, Jupiter also presides over international affairs, religion, and political beliefs. Now, not only have similar protests have erupted across the globe, but look at it. It's directly connected to foreign affairs. It's Israel and Palestine, religion, the Jewish population, and political beliefs, right? Who supports Israel? Who doesn't support Israel? Now, one of Jupiter's roles is to expand whatever it touches. Well, in this case, it's touching Uranus. And not only have we seen the number of campus rebellions increase across the nation, but we've really seen many of the universities descend into chaos, which is very much Uranus. Uranus is also a planet of extremes. And with some protesters, not all, commandeering buildings, calling for death to the Jewish population, death to Israel, death to the United States. It's not a stretch to call those particular protesters extremists. Now, Uranus rules rebellion. It also rules organized movements, disruption, separation, and technology. Well, as a result of these protests, some colleges and universities have suspended classes, right? Classes have been disrupted and they've turned to remote learning, which is the technology. And in some cases, commencement ceremonies, some were interrupted, some were scaled back, and some were canceled. Uranus rules strangers. When we talk about the 11th house of friends, it's friends and it's acquaintances. But if you said, where do strangers belong? Well, it goes into the 11th house that Uranus rules. And so there have been reports that in many of the cases, people protesting have absolutely no connection to the universities. And so there you have that, I'm going to say, stranger connection. Now, last but not least, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction took place in Taurus, and that is the sign that rules money. Now, there is a money connection here. First and foremost, we have some parents and students that were outraged by it all and yelling they want their tuition. They want tuition refunds. But there have also been reports emerging that the protests were being funded by different organizations. One of them is the Tides Foundation. So there is a money connection there as well. So that is the big one, the one that's ongoing even as I'm recording this. But there were 2 others. On April 23rd, the Federal Trade Commission announced a rule that will ban almost all existing current non-compete agreements and prohibit new ones in the workplace. Now, if you're not familiar with a non-compete agreement, it is a legal contract, a binding contract between the employee and the employer, and it prohibits the employee from working for a competitor for a defined length of time. Sometimes they're used to prohibit someone from, let's say, opening a competing business within a certain time frame or within a certain radius. But what happens in effect is if you are bound by one of these agreements and you're not allowed to go work for a competitor for, let's say, 2 years, well, what happens if you don't like your job? Maybe you want to change your job. Maybe you have to change your job. You're not allowed to work for a competitor for 2 years. So what do you do with all the skills, all this experience, especially if you like what you do? You've got to do something else for 2 years. By banning these agreements, this legal rule, there you have Jupiter, will effectively liberate, there you have Uranus, every employee who is bound by one, thereby removing these restrictions on them of where they could earn their income. Earned income, there you have it. There is your Taurus. I do want to point out that although this rule is expected to go into effect later this year, sometime in August, the Federal Trade Commission's authority to invalidate these contracts right across the country is being challenged in the court, and there are more lawsuits expected to follow. So whether or not it will stand will remain to be seen, or if it will be modified. But that did happen right after the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And the last one is banking. Now, Taurus doesn't just rule money. It rules the entire banking industry, right? The financial systems. And on April 26th, the Republic First Bank in Philadelphia became the first regional bank failure of 2024. Fingers crossed, it's the last. But it was seized by the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. It has since been taken over by Fulton Bank, so people didn't lose their money. But it did happen right after the conjunction. So that wraps it up. I just wanted to give 3 distinctly different examples of how a major astrological aspect in the heavens can manifest here in the world below. And so it really brings to life, as above, so below. I'm Debra Ann Clement. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoy this, please hit the subscribe button, visit my website at debraclement.com, and sign up for my newsletter and download a free mini workshop. All right. Until next time, may Jupiter's blessings be your constant companion.